welcome to the Messianics podcast, a podcast about all things Messianic Judaism. Each episode, we will be sharing our opinions as we tackle some of the biggest issues in Messianic Judaism. Now, here's your hosts, Rabbis Eric, David, Jonathan, and Toby. Hey guys, and thanks for joining us today. So as you're already aware, especially if you've been listening to our podcast for a while now, we were very intentional on the name of the podcast. The Messianics podcast is Messianic Judaism, and realistically anything in the body of Messiah, but Messianic Judaism does kind of tend to have some antics that go on and different things that happen. And so today's episode, we're just going to kind of have some fun as the four of us all are working in two specific congregations, but have had involvement in congregations all over the place. And so we're just going to kind of share some of the interesting and sometimes funny experiences we've had with people coming into a Messianic synagogue fresh with no real experience, not really knowing what they're walking into, or maybe people walking in with their YouTube certificate from, whatever cuckoo theology thing they found and got hooked up to on YouTube. But we're just going to kind of share some of our experiences of some of the funny stories and funny encounters that we've had over the years in Messianic Judaism. And I'll actually kick this one off by throwing this out. When we were in Georgia with Beit Shalom Messianic Synagogue in Thomasville, Georgia, I was in office one day, and this guy comes into the building, and like where the office was on one complete side of the synagogue, and so we would always open up or unlock the door that was there, but we never used that door for anything other than office hours. So whenever the synagogue was open, that door stayed locked because it was in the sanctuary technically, and then the other entry point was unlocked so people could come and go. But we'd always leave that open for office hours, people to come in. And so this guy comes in, and I get up and I go to introduce myself to him and chat with him for a minute. And he comes up and goes, he hands me this journal, and I was like, hey, if you don't mind, would you read this and just kind of give me your thoughts? And hands me this journal. So I've got it in my hand, and before I get a chance to actually look at it or open it or anything, I'm holding it, and we're talking for a second, and out of nowhere, this guy goes, so I'm actually the second coming of Jesus, and I'm here. The Father sent me here to come and share about my ministry and what I'm here to do, and my disciple is, I kid you not, he goes, my disciple, I'm stuck here in Thomasville because my disciple is still locked up in the loony bin. I forget what they called it there. It was actually the hospital as a name, but it's literally the loony bin. He's like, my disciple's still locked up there. I just got out. Word. He's like, it's going to take me a few days before he's free so that we can go about our ministry. And he's talking to me. He goes, and that talking about the journal we put in my hands. He goes, that's my new Gospels. These are the new Gospels, the addition to it. And I'm going to hand this back to you now. And he kind of leads himself into the sanctuary, and he goes up towards the stage, and he's up there. And so I go and I sit down, and I may or may not on a regular basis have some form of personal protection upon my person. And this is the first time that I've ever sat with my hand at the ready somewhere near it in case, because this guy was going off the rails. He started talking to me, and then the fact that I didn't accept that he was the second coming of Jesus or whatever, lost his mind and started getting really agitated, which I know is hard to believe since he just came out the loony bin, but was really agitated, really angry, getting mad, going nuts. And so finally I was able to kind of usher him back towards the door, and he's screaming and ranting and raving at me. He climbs in this little hoopty car that he's driving, and he starts to pull off, and it happened to be that there was a cop sitting in our parking lot clocking people as they're driving down the main street there. And so as he peeled out the parking lot, I walk over to the cop's window. I said, so hey, I don't know how many churches this guy's been to already, or how many congregations he's going to hit up afterwards, but this is what he said, this is who he is, this is what's going on. He's very angry. He's going to come across somebody in a church around here at some point that's going to really make him mad, and he's going to hurt somebody. And so the cop left to go check on him. He's like, thanks for letting me know, whatever. But that was probably the craziest experience I've had. And I know it's probably a little different than somebody coming in and worshiping with us or whatever, but that was I figured we'll throw it out with the craziest scenario I could come up with, but that was the craziest situation I've ever been in.
My disciple is still in the loony bin.
Exactly.
But which kind of makes me wonder, like, did you just get out of the lunar?
No, he said he did.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He said he had just gotten out the day before.
Wow.
When we were back in, when I was in Macon, Beth Yeshua, this guy came in, and this was back in like 2011, 2012. This is over 10 years ago. But this guy came in, and he was wearing, I don't know what you call it, but, it's the white collar that Catholic priests wear, or not just Catholic priests, but it's that white.
Yeah, clerical collar.
Yeah, so he was wearing a clerical collar. He was wearing like a suit jacket and pants, and he had a short with the clerical collar. And if I'm not mistaken, the clerical collar that's worn when you're like doing your priestly duties, right? Or it's not a fashion statement, correct? It's not something like I'm going to wear.
Yeah, it's a Catholic thing.
I'm not going to wear the priestly collar to go, I don't know, to Walmart and shop, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it was Shabbat morning, and this guy shows up, and he's wearing this wardrobe, and I just looked at him, and I was like, I just remember thinking, okay, that's weird. He'd never come before, and he immediately, started talking to people in leadership. Strange, because he wasn't just coming. Because let's imagine it's your first time at a congregation. You're not in leadership or anything. You're just you're seeking the Lord or whatever. And if I generally don't like going to new places like congregations. Because everybody's looking at you and knows you're the new guy.
Yeah.
So unless it's like a massive like church or something with like
conference
huge. But generally, if it's a smaller place, which we had, like 300 people or something, and you generally knew if someone was unfamiliar. But I'm not going to.
They're usually those ones with the deers in the headlight when the liturgy starts. They're like, "What is this? Why are they in tongues?" What's
right? If they're new, yeah. But I'm thinking if I'm new to a place, I'm generally going to just observe.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm not going to go and try to meet people. This guy was kind of going to people who were clearly like doing something as far as helping the congregation function, leadership, or shamashim. He was just going up to these people and talking to them. And I was the worship leader at the time, and he came. He was talking to me at one point. I'm just like, hey, he seemed like a nice guy, but that was strange behavior. Then he walks our head shamashim. A real nice guy, just kind of talking to him, and takes him in the sanctuary, and he's like, "Well, I'm an up front guy." So he said, "I'm a sit up front guy." So he goes all the way to the front row, and the rabbi of the congregation, his microphone and stuff was sitting on the chair. He had not arrived yet. So, and the guy goes, and he's like talking to the shamashim, and then he goes to sit down in the front row, and he almost sits on the microphone. I just remember thinking, this dude is not something. It was off. Like, he's not paying attention. He's going up to people who are like in leadership or who are kind of in functioning roles. I said, so this guy and he's wearing a clerical collar, so he wants to be seen.
Yeah,
he thinks he's somebody. And he came once, and then he came a second week, and I think he like brought his family or something, or his wife. And I just remember being like, went up to the rabbi at the, and I said, hey, what's his deal? And he goes, oh, he's a guy that thinks he's somebody that's coming in that probably wants a position of leadership and wants me to know who he is and stuff. He goes, and that's why he's wearing that getup. And that is the first thing that came to mind when we brought up this topic, was like, oh, the clerical collar guy. and it was so, and I can think of one other time, I'm not going to go into the story, but the one other time that I can think of, one of the most disruptive people to come into a congregation came in wearing a robe, like a church robe, like a choir lady robe, and I'm like,
I thought you were going to say like initiation robe,
right? So it's not hard to see that, when you have somebody come in and they're wearing religious getup. I don't even like to say getup, because a clerical collar, it's very important to the priest. And I respect there's a lot of devoted Catholics out there who love God, and I'm not knocking the priestly collar. I'm just saying, when you see somebody come into a Messianic synagogue wearing that, and that, it's like, okay, why are you doing this?
Yeah.
or why are you coming in wearing this robe? You know, and that's one of my weird stories as far as like the weirdest.
Yeah, and again, we're not knocking the collar, just to be clear, because and Catholics, Lutherans, others wear them.
High church,
when they're in worship, or even if they come visit your congregation to be there. But this guy just looked out of sorts, like he was not.
And he only came twice and never came back, because I think that he, in my opinion, because I don't think he got the attention he wanted to get from probably our rabbi at the time.
Right.
Yeah,
so my funniest, and when I say funniest, weirdest kind of thing is, we had a guy that came, it's been years ago when we first started, and we had a guy that came and he was wearing, just to describe him, he had a baseball hat on, and then he had on his baseball cap, like stapled to his baseball cap was the headpiece of it to set a tefillin. And then he had cut the straps off the tefillin and had the arm piece on his arm, but it was just the loop and the tefillin and not wrapped down his arm. And then on his shirt he had pinned a yellow star, like the Nazis made the Jews. But then he was wearing a t-shirt that was unkept and raggedy looking shorts and flip-flops. And then he had, I don't know if you've ever seen these little Jewish teddy bears where they have the little talits on them. So it's like a baby, like the talit the size a baby would wear.
Right.
So that was around his neck, and then he had a potato chip clip, like you used to hold potato chip bags shut, between the two sides of this mini talit that he was wearing when he came in. No. And so, I talked to him and said, what's going on? And he said, I'm Jewish and this and that. And he said, God called me to change the Florida law concerning football. My son wants to play football, but they have all the games on Friday nights and Saturdays. And I'm here. God sent me to Florida so that I can help to get legislation passed to change the day football is on, so it's not discriminatory against Jewish people, so the kids like mine can play football. And so we talked for a little bit. He came back one more time, but I had told him, I said, look, if you want to wear the tefillin, the thing, it's wrong the way you're doing it. It's not tradition. It's not. But you're not wearing the yellow star when you come in here, and you're not going to do that and come in here. And he got in all this uproar about it's this star of persecution, and they're persecuting my son because he's not able to play football. And he was equating in his mind the Shoah,
the Friday Night Lights with the Shoah,
the Holocaust against the Jewish people and millions of non-Jewish people that were exterminated by the Nazis, with the fact that his local football team wouldn't change the day they play ball so that his son could. In his mind, that was an equivalent situation. And so he left our congregation, said he was going to the conservative congregation. So I called the conservative rabbi and said, look, I just want you to know, if this guy shows up, we didn't send him and he's not us. I don't want you to think that. But that was like one of the weirdest things was this guy dressed like that because he said, I was sent by God to save football. And I was like, no.
Did he only come that one time?
He came twice. Once he came the first day. He came back a second time, and
to update you on the legislative process.
Right, but when he came, that's when I met him at the door, and I said, "Look, you can't." And then he left, said he was going somewhere else. But so that was the one, and then the other one that I wanted to share real quick because it reminds me of my friend Rabbi Krause, who was the rabbi of Panama, and he had come to visit our synagogue, and it was just before the Super Bowl. And I had announced, now this again was years ago, I had announced that we were having a men's prayer meeting at my house on Super Bowl Sunday that some of the men would be praying for one team and the other men would be praying for the other team, but that all men were welcome to come to the congregation. And this lady who'd been coming, visiting for a few weeks, said, "Can I say something?" And I said, "Sure, you're welcome to say," because this was just during the announcements time of the service. And she said, "God is serious." And I said, "Yes, he is. And I do not think you should be hosting a Super Bowl. Super Bowl football is violent." And she went on through this whole thing. And I said, "Well, I appreciate your opinion. And thank you." And then she started going again. And she just kept on. And to the point where I said, "Look, you need to stop." And then Rabbi Krause said, as only he can, "You are being rebellious," to the lady. And then I said, "Look, you need to stop. The announcement time is over. We're entering into our worship service, and you need to stop." And she said, "Do you want me to leave?" And I said, "No, I want you to behave." Oh. And then she said, "Well," I said, "Okay, now I want you to leave." And so we escorted her out as she, shook the dust from her shoes and called down the curses of the Egyptian gods upon us. And
she did that.
And all, yeah, it was. But so those are our two. My two memories.
Because that's a big leap. You're going from Super Bowl's violent to Egyptian gods. Like,
I call down the curses of Ra.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
So it was.
I mean, I can understand being like, "Oh, you know."
So yeah. Since then, anytime somebody started to act up, jokingly, or anybody who's been around that long will go, "You are being rebellious."
Yeah.
So, anyhow, Rabbi Jonathan,
I wish people would wear, I wish everyone would come to service that does with a merit badge sash, but each of the merit badges be the little thumbnails of the YouTube channels they subscribe to, so we can see what you're watching.
First time visitors.
First time, just be like, all right, you've got 5 out of 10 of the ones we would disagree with, so this may not be the place for you.
That would be hilarious. Get the little stickers like they have for RVs that you put on their back window that says, "I've been to this many states," or
that's right,
or the Grand Canyon, this and that. With
they
should have to have it on their Bible cover or their talit bag or something.
Something just to let us know, man. Be like, "Man, I just don't know if this is going to be a place."
They know what we're walking into with this one guy. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is that almost everybody that comes to our congregation has walked through some kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, including us as leaders. We have our own. There's a reason that they say Messianic Judaism is granola made up from fruits, nuts, and flakes. And so there's those things. So when we say these things, when we're talking about these funny experiences, it's not that we're mocking the person, and we pray for the person. I prayed for that guy that came, and we prayed for this lady, and we tried to deal with her and talk to her and help her. But there's some experiences that are just funny.
They're so absurd.
Memories.
And I just don't want to. And just to say, I'm not speaking against the guy with the clerical collar necessarily. It was interesting.
Yeah,
it was odd, and I think I just want to make the point that I think that I think it's so important when you're coming into a new place, because somebody might ask, "Well, why would you think that? Why would you judge the guy based on what he was wearing?" I was like, "Well, because when you're going into a synagogue or religious establishment, but let's say synagogues. I don't want to make it too wide. You're going into a new church or a new synagogue that's already under the authority of another of some leadership. That's not you. It's your first time coming to this place. You shouldn't wear your leadership garb, whatever you're leading or think you're leading.
Yeah.
I think it's a matter of humility, and also, I think honestly, we should do our best to try not to be seen and allow God to. You know what I'm saying? That's the point I was trying.
And it's one thing if you're invited as that role.
Sure.
If we were to bring in, I have a friend who's a pastor in our area that's ordained pastor with the Church of God in Christ, and which is a charismatic denomination. Really good guy, really lovely guy. And if I were to invite him to come and speak, he regularly wears the collar and
right,
the black shirt and pants.
He's operating in his
if I invited him to speak as that role, that's great. Show up like that's awesome.
Sure.
Just like if you invite me to your congregation, I'm going to show up wearing what I wear. I mean, I'm not going to show up with a
right. If I go to visit a church just to visit,
you're not going to wear
I don't wear my talit.
Right.
Yeah. But if they invite me to speak, I probably would put it on before I spoke.
Yeah.
Another funny experience,
and even then, not all the time.
But to just show up to try and draw attention to yourself.
That's what I think was
because I've seen you go to places and it's just
right.
I'm doing that today.
Another funny experience that I had was with a real good friend, the guy that I love, and I think all of you know Les Morrison. Les and Darcy showed up at Bridom. We were a very new congregation, and the storms hit. The Katrina and Ivan had hit, and they were working with a company that did roof work during the storms. And so I didn't know Les from Adam. And he showed up at our synagogue, and he had his violin in one hand, his mandolin in another hand, and he walked in and he said, "I'm Les Morrison, and if you'd like me to join your worship team this morning, I'd be happy to do so."
Oh.
And I was like, "No." Yeah. and I don't know who you are. And he said, "Well, I'm Les Morrison, and I know this person and that person and this person and that person." And
here's the thing with Les is Les isn't saying I'm Les Morrison like you should know Les Morrison. Like it's not like he's being arrogant about it. He's just saying, but this is who I am. Like this is what I do.
Yeah, right. And for those that don't know,
it wasn't like a movie star getting pulled over and going, "Do you know who I am?"
Right. For those who don't know, I encourage you to look up Les Morrison on YouTube, on Amazon. Get his violin. He's a concert quality violinist. He's an amazing musician. Yeah. He's a wonderful guy.
He shows up to recording sessions to record for other people's songs. And he'll go into the studio and they'll go, "Okay, here's the song," and they'll play it for him, and he'll go, "Okay, well, give me a couple of tracks," and he'll just start playing whatever flows, and then he's like, "All right, pick up whichever one you think's best." That's
but he's an amazing musician. Yeah. But he just walked up, and I didn't know him from anybody. So he said, "I'll be back next week. Feel free to call and check on me." So I called a couple people, and they said, "Yeah, he's an amazing musician." So him and his wife joined our worship team the next week because they were escaping from the storm. Yeah. So it was just so funny because he was again, this is
they were with you guys for several years.
He was with us for almost 3 years.
That's a funny story that turned out really good.
Yeah. But it was so funny because he just walked up like everybody knows me, and I was like, "No, I don't know you, but I appreciate you, and you're welcome to worship with us."
And this was at a time when Messianic Judaism is kind of bigger now. I mean, it's still its own little world, but it is kind of bigger, and so there's a lot more people that know people now. But this was at a point where it was still kind of...
Yeah, this was a long time ago, and Les and Darcy, and I tell a story about them, which has nothing to do with funny experiences at synagogue, but I did their wedding for them when they got married, because they were single when they both were working for a company. And the company brought them into town. They were selling roofs and stuff. But they had fallen in love, and they decided to get married. So I did their wedding for them. And they were on the way from the synagogue to their honeymoon, and they stopped. We saw them at Walmart parking lot. And so I teased them, and I still do. I said, Walmart has got to be an evil, spiritly inspired place, because if it has such power that it draws you into the store between the synagogue and your honeymoon. There is too much power in that building. This is an evil place that needs to be, So, but anyhow, I met him in that way, and it was just a funny experience with somebody at synagogue that turned out to be a very, very positive, and we still love them and appreciate them.
One of my favorite Les stories was we were in Colorado. in Denver for the Promise Keepers event. There was their 25th anniversary event or whatever it was, and so we're there, and I think we were all at the DoubleTree or something like that, in the lobby hanging out, and there were probably 50, 60 rabbis and their wives and all just hanging out together and catching up and chatting, whatever. And here comes Les out of the elevator with his violin on his shoulder and his bow lined up and ready, and for the next 3 hours he just arbitrarily walked around the restaurant and the lobby serenading the entire place.
Wow.
Yeah, just an amazing guy. But it was a funny synagogue experience.
Yeah, he's very bold and courageous.
Yeah.
I had this. I'm just going to tell a quick funny one, and then I want to ask. Really, kind of put a question out there, but
I have one after you're done.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. I was. Then I'll ask my question. I'll save that then. But no, I had a guy. We had a guy come in to his congregation. It was when we were making. This guy came in, and he looked really. He just looked really ragged and kind of dirty and stuff. So he stuck out. Which I'm telling you was not a good decision based on what he was doing in the synagogue. Because, okay, so he came in and he just looked really haggard. It's a better word for it. And he wore this big heavy coat, not like a trench coat, but it was just kind of like a long sleeve,
big pea coat,
something kind of like that, but it zipped up. It had pockets. Just a regular jacket,
like a duster or something.
No, it wasn't a duster. It wasn't like a trench coat. Just like a jacket with pockets. Just imagine like a jacket with 2 pockets on the front, 2 pockets on the side. It was like a khaki. I remember it was khaki colored. He had a hole cut out in one of his front pockets on his breast, and there was a camera sticking out of it. And God, that reminds me of another story. But anyway,
you just popped a story in my head. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So this guy has a camera sticking out of his pocket, and he's just kind of walking around. He's kind of like moving his body I'm sure to make sure he's catching whatever it is he's trying to film for whatever reason. We don't know. So somebody sees the camera because the guy's sticking out.
Yeah.
Like my thing is one, it's incredibly inappropriate. I would never do that. But if I am going to do it, I'm putting myself in the shoes of the criminal,
Sure.
I'm putting myself in their shoes. I'm thinking I'm going to look as normal and as forgettable as possible. I'm just going to look normal.
Yeah.
This guy comes in and he looks just really haggard, and he's like and he's got a camera sticking out of his front pocket. And somebody sees him, one of the shamashim sees him and goes up to him, and they said, "I'm sorry, we noticed that you have a camera sticking out of your pocket. What's going on?" And he goes, "Oh, yes, well, I'm from some kind of, I don't even remember what name of the religious organization he's from." He goes, "And we know about you guys. You're the Yeshuans." That's what he called us.
The Yeshuans.
The Yeshuans.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's his word for Messianic Jews or what, but he said, "You guys are the Yeshuans." And he goes, and the shamashim was like, "Okay, well, listen, you can't be in here and film. You can't do this, all right?" And the guy was, he actually didn't cause a disruption, like as far as like a loud, they saw him, the shamashim did, and said, "That's weird." And he left.
Yeah.
He's like, "Okay, my bad." And he left. He never came back again. But I never will forget that he called us Yeshuans.
Yeshuans. Man, it's so bizarre to me. It's funny, because I've run into people that have tried to come up with they're like, what is the name of of people who because they don't, for whatever reason, they don't like Messianic Judaism. That name to them is too vague and whatever. So they're like, we're gonna be the Nazrim. I'm like, well, that's just Christian. That's Hebrew for Christians. So okay, and you don't
I like people of the way, but mostly because of Mandalorian.
Yeah,
it's the way.
That's good.
But people. So and they don't want to be called Christians. They don't want to be called Messianic Jews. But they're like, okay, so what about the Nazrim? I'm like, that's Hebrew for Christians.
Well,
so
you should. I wish we would have met before, so you could have suggested Yeshuans.
Yeah, Yeshuans. That's right. So that's a new one on my list of funny names. The Yeshuans.
I can only assume because we call him Yeshua.
Yeah. Sure. It makes sense. But,
so Yeshuans over there.
But man, I just
I just thought it was funny.
That's funny.
So your story.
This was back when I was at Dothan. It was just a kind of open forum meeting one day after service because the leadership wanted to address something. I think children had been disruptive on their phones, and remember, this was back when DMF was only like probably 50 or 60 people at the time.
What's DMF?
Dothan Messianic Fellowship.
Gotcha,
so that's
okay.
where I was attending before I came to Brennan. And so this was when there weren't a ton of people, and so when the children were playing games and being disruptive on the phones, it really stood out during service. And so the leadership just kind of wanted to address that, which was fine, but there was this couple that had come with, I'm assuming their grandkids. It was an older couple. This was their first time here,
and they just don't manage the kids.
It was an open forum meeting. Well, so they come and they're sitting out in this meeting. Never have been here before.
Okay.
This is the first time they're there, and they're kind of like allowing people to add input on ways we can resolve it. Just parents, explain. Do we need to come up with a rule of no phones or whatever? And I remember this older lady begins to go on this tirade about like touchscreen devices, and it's like she was like, they're scrying mirrors, and she holds up her smartphone. It's like, well, so you have an instrument of witchcraft with you, yet you're condemning this as being an instrument of witchcraft. I don't understand where you're quite going with this. And
I've never even heard of it.
Yeah. She was they're scrying mirrors, and goes all through this stuff about gives this little debrief of like fake internet Hebrew of like why it allows evil into the home. And I was saying, it's like, look, you can use these for evil. You can use these to like for good or for evil. They're tools, but like to make them as like they're intrinsically evil while you have one in your hand that belongs to you, I just don't think is going down the road you think it was going. And that was just like, it was, I'd heard some crazy stuff before, but that was the first time I was sitting like in a public thing where someone like legitimately like kind of went off the rails, and I was like, oh,
we had a couple that called me and asked me if I would do marriage counseling for them, and I very rarely do post marriage counseling, and but I had counseled a couple that they had known, and they recommended me. So my wife and I drive over to another city, which is where they were, and sat down at the table, and honest to goodness, this was their very first statement to me. Every time we get drunk, we get in a fight. Can you help us? And I said, let me give me just a minute. Stop getting drunk.
Yeah, there you go.
Or at the very least, stop getting drunk with each other.
No, find some new people to get drunk with.
Help us fight constructively. Drunk.
So before your question, because I don't want to forget about your question. So I'm gonna share two things from CMC that were funny experiences. We had early on. We were maybe a year and a half old. This NAIG, and this guy calls up from Michigan. Or his number was from Michigan. He said he just moved down from Michigan, and I answer the phone, and he says, "Hey, Rabbi, this is so and so, and I was in Michigan. I'm a worship leader. I felt like the Lord called me down here, and He gave me the name of your congregation. I feel like this is where I'm supposed to plug in and attend, and so on. Is it okay if I come and visit this Saturday for Shabbat service?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's welcome. Come and join us. It's fine." So he comes in, and at that point in time, in our announcements every week, we had a very simple announcement that said, if you're interested in membership, please see Rabbi David. He'll explain the process to you. So after service that day, this guy comes up to me and goes, "Rabbi, I want to ask you a question." I said, "Okay." He goes, I'm interested in becoming a member at the synagogue and helping with worship and all. And so what's the membership process? So I lay it out for him. I said, you've got X number of months you have to come faithfully. This is the process you have to follow through. And then we have an application and interview. And then we plug you in and bring you up from the congregation and announce you as a member and lay hands on you, pray for you. And he goes, but Rabbi, why do I have to wait the 4 months before I can become a member? I feel like God called me here now. I said, okay, but this is our process. This is what everybody has to do, and it's equal across the board. And he goes, but Rabbi, like God called me here. Why do I have to go through that? I said, well, let me ask you something. He goes, what? I said, do you think God didn't know what our membership process was when He called you here? And he got so mad, and we never saw him again. But the other is something that just happened in the last maybe 4 or 5 months. We had this newer family that was coming, and they were brand new, kind of dabbling in Messianic Judaism. Really, they're kind of dabbling in kind of the Hebrew roots side, and were, they found out the synagogue was there and started coming some.
Sure.
I mean, really nice people. Like, we didn't have any issues with them. They were good people, whatever. But this one particular week, it was when we were in Bereshit, and we're reading through about Abraham in the parsha about Abraham telling Sarah to twice to say, "You're my sister, not my wife," and save your hide or save my hide, but whatever happens to you is what it is. It's my paraphrase of the account. And I said, it's really interesting to me that we've got. If you look through the Bible, you've got all of these individuals throughout Scripture that God gives us that are complete and total train wrecks. Like, they just jack everything up. I said, here's Abraham, the father of our faith, is this complete and total train wreck, messes up left and right, and yet this is the hero that God established for us to look at what a righteous life is. And it isn't because he got everything right all the time. He was a train wreck. He messed up over and over again, but it was because of the fact that he constantly returned back to God. It was this heart of repentance coming back to God. And this lady came up to me after service and goes, "How dare you?" I said, "What?" "How dare you say that Abraham was a train wreck?" And da-da-da. I said, she goes, "Abraham was perfect. The Scripture says in Hebrews that by his faith he was made righteous. He was perfect. How dare you say he was a train wreck?" I said, wait. I said, are you saying Abraham never messed up? Well, Abraham was perfect. No. Yes, Abraham was made righteous. But he had to be something other than righteous in order to be made righteous, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't seriously look at Hebrews and think that he's retrofitting the entire story of Abraham's life to say that Abraham never messed up ever. Right. Like, we're all in this room, all of us believing in Messiah are made righteous through Messiah. Does that mean we've never messed up because it's been retroactively changed? Like, no. But she was like livid, and they never came back. They had been coming for a couple, maybe 2 months at that point.
I know who you're talking about now.
And
it took me a minute.
They never came back afterward. I mean, but she was livid about it. And I was like, are you serious? This is, like, out of everything, this is where we're going to have...
So Toby has a question that he wanted to give, but before I did, I wanted to share one funny experience about Rabbi David.
Okay. Is this the Purim story?
This is the Purim story.
Oh gosh.
So
it'll go nicely. It'll go neatly with everything else that you've said over the past few weeks.
We're a young congregation in Pensacola, and
when I was a young warthog.
And keep in mind, I helped start this congregation.
Right. So Rabbi David goes off to school to train and learn to be a rabbi. And he comes back on vacation, and it happens to be Purim. It happens to be the Feast of Esther time. And so I think to myself, this would be a great opportunity to give him an opportunity. I mean, after all, how can you mess up Purim? How can you? This is such a great story. People are familiar with it. He doesn't have... This is safe. This is not an issue. He's good here. So I ask him to speak. And he gets up and he goes, "I know that many of you have heard the story of Purim. And many times it's done in plays and programs. And it's described as if these young girls are in a beauty pageant, that the king is viewing them and then choosing who is going to be the winner of the pageant, and thus his bride." And this is what he says. But in fact, what this was more of a test drive. And I about choked, as did most of the congregation. And then after we composed ourselves...
The best part was, for the life of me, to this day, can't remember what I was actually preaching on. Like what the point was I was making in the message. But he's in the back of the sanctuary. And whatever it was I was saying, like, he was on board with it. And he's just nodding his head like it's revolutionary in his head. He's nodding his head. And then all of a sudden that comes out and his head just stops and his jaw hits the floor. Like, just wide open. And for like the next 5 minutes, he's just staring at me, mouth agape.
That has been many, many years ago. But Rabbi David has never, and unless there's a Philip experience, Philip is in the desert and he wakes up in Azotus. Like, God translated him to that place. So unless it's Purim and David is in another city and pops in and appears like Star Trek transporter to the Bima on Purim. He is not going to preach on Purim at my synagogue. So I just wanted to share.
And for the record, I jokingly, to my wife's annoyance, jokingly call myself the shock rocker of Messianic rabbis. Like, I will intentionally say things just to make people have to think. And in all the years that have passed since, that is probably one of the more mild comments I've made in a sermon.
So anyhow, that's my
or on the show.
That's my funny experience with a visiting rabbi who spoke at my congregation on Purim, but will never speak on Purim again at my congregation. So what's your question, Toby?
It's not. It's kind of tough, really, after all the really entertaining stories. Which, but
probably should finish out on a serious note.
Yeah. So back in Macon, again, years ago, is when I was a worship leader. A guy came in, and he was actually perfectly normal. He was a Jewish guy, though, older, and he was very, very, I don't want to say austere, but he was very stoic, acting during the service and stuff. And and after the service was over, he actually wanted to speak to the rabbi, and I was kind of standing around. I wanted to kind of listen, to what they were talking about, and I'm kind of hanging around and stuff, and I hear him talking, and then I just kind of walk up because I just want to listen, just kind of want to learn, and I'm like, man, this is a Jewish guy. I don't forget how I knew he was Jewish. I think it might have just been, I think I might have found out then that he was Jewish, but I noticed he was there at service, and he just looked very skeptical. He was just kind of very like, I don't know. And the rabbi was explaining things to him and stuff, and he goes, well, what did you think? Blah blah. He goes, well, you don't have a minion. And I guess I thought of that story while we were talking, and I guess I wanted to ask, like, have you, any of you, because I've never actually experienced it, that was the closest, but have you guys ever experienced someone coming in from like a heavily observant orthodoxy type culture, and when they come into your synagogue and they want to speak to you, or have you ever had an encounter like that? Because I'd love to know what they think of like worship music.
Yeah, we had a guy who was an Orthodox guy, and I knew he was Orthodox because he was dressed Orthodox.
Oh wow! So he had
the garb
and had it right,
and he had it right.
Wow!
He wasn't wearing a little children's talit with a chip clip or anything, but he was like serious.
Right.
And he came in and he sat there, and I walked over and welcomed him, and he said, "I don't know if I can stay." And I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, because you've got sound equipment operating on the Shabbat. You have this." And then he looked up, and because our building belonged to a Catholic church before we bought it, there's a stained glass window that's now covered with a board, but it was still, we had not covered it yet. We were just recently rented the building. It wasn't even ours at the point, so we couldn't really, make changes. So, and he said, and you have Catholic iconography up on that window, and I'm just not comfortable being in this sanctuary. It's awkward to me to have sound equipment operating and the window. And I said, well, look, how about this? I said, why don't I just stand in the foyer with you for a while? And we'll just, and he was okay with that. And then and then I said, but in a little bit I'm going to have to go inside, and do my stuff. But he stood the whole service out in the vestibule, outside the sanctuary where, and then afterwards we talked, and he said something that I've heard a number of times. He said, this is the first Messianic synagogue I've ever been to. It was surprisingly Jewish. Wow. And he said he was just visiting for the weekend. He wanted to go to somewhere on Shabbat.
Just a synagogue. And
he wouldn't drive, so he was walking from a neighborhood close by. And he said he appreciated our sensitivity toward his feelings, and that we didn't, laugh at him, mock him, or whatever for feeling that way, but made it possible for him to participate in the liturgy and the service and all without violating his own personal feelings about things.
Okay.
So that was a good example of exactly that. We had somebody who came who was extremely observant and to the point where he was uncomfortable with power equipment, sound equipment, and projectors and all that going on during computers and things.
Yeah.
It was funny. I went to a conservative synagogue one time. We were invited, my wife and I, to be there because of friendship with the rabbi, and they had a cell phone up on the bima videotaping and project, on YouTube the service because it was a special event. And so, having seen that, I got out my phone and I was following along with the readings of the Torah reading on my phone, because I have a Torah app on my phone that I can read along with. And I was there, and one of the ushers came over and said, you can't use your phone in the sanctuary on Shabbos. And I didn't say anything. I just put my phone up, but it made me funny. And I spoke to the rabbi afterwards. I said, one of your shamashim came over and told me not to use my cell phone in the service. I said, but while I was there, his wife was shopping on Amazon on her cell phone in the service, and you had a cell phone actually functioning to broadcast the service. I said, and just as an outsider experiencing your synagogue and as a friend, that's an inconsistent action.
Yeah.
And of course, the shamash didn't know his wife was shopping on Amazon during the service.
Sure.
She was sitting right next to me, and we saw that. But so I say that because when we're talking about just this question, if somebody Jewish came in or somebody who is not Jewish came in, it was their first time, whatever we do, we should be consistent in how we do it. If we're going to have sound systems and all that, then we should have them and not act as if, those kind of things. So
you don't necessarily like pander to somebody, but there are ways to be reverent to where they are.
And this gentleman, we made it possible for him to participate.
No, that's a great story.
I haven't had. I mean, our area, there's not in Baldwin County. There's not really a Orthodox presence, and every once in a while you may get somebody to come down for vacation along the beach there, but again, there's not a synagogue within walking distance.
Is there
so
even a Chabad in Mobile?
In Mobile there is,
Okay.
There was Chabad in Mobile before there was in Pensacola.
Gotcha.
And so they're not going to be coming, but we have had non-believing traditional Jews come from conservative congregations, Reformed congregations. Matter of fact, the one I remember the most is there was this young couple, very, at least my opinion, very obviously Reformed, that came for our Yom Kippur service, our morning service Yom Kippur one year. They happened to be in the area for a wedding, and so they wanted to squeeze in a quick Yom Kippur service before the wedding. They didn't know we were Messianic till they got there. They decided to stick it out. Or no, they did. They saw our website, and they came anyways, and they stuck it out. They weren't believers. The wife, the wife looked like she was ready for the club on Saturday night rather than for synagogue on Yom Kippur, and which was kind of odd because she walked in and in our congregation, everybody's, I mean, I'm not saying people are prudish, but everybody's pretty modest dressed, and it's Shabbat and everybody's whatever, and so she walks in wearing what looked like she was ready for the club for, and but they were in the back, and they went through the service, and the things that, like I tell people, and I told them this when they came in, is if there's something we say, like the blessing of Messiah, if you don't agree with it, don't say it. It's not going to hurt our feelings any. But most of our service is what you're accustomed to, so follow along with what you're comfortable with, and if you're not comfortable with it, ignore it. And now I have had people that have visited the area that were in that were more Orthodox leaning. I won't say they were actually Orthodox, but they went to. There's a lot of people that go to Orthodox synagogues on Shabbat, but they're not specifically Orthodox.
Right.
That's just the kind of traditional slant they prefer of service. They maybe live a more conservative life, but they'll go to, and those are the people that'll drive 3 blocks away, park their car on the street, and walk the rest of the way into the synagogue.
I've heard of that.
But I have had people. I just had it a couple of months ago. Somebody called me and they were down for vacation and they wanted to come to synagogue, but they were looking for an Orthodox synagogue. And I was like, well, there isn't an Orthodox synagogue in Baldwin County. There's definitely not going to be one within walking distance of where your condo is for the week. And I said we're a Messianic synagogue, and she says, well, what's that? And I explained to her what it was. And she said, oh, no, we're Orthodox Jews. We don't do that. We're not. And I was like, no, but I mean, we're still a synagogue. Like, we do liturgy, we do a Torah service. You're welcome to come. The things you don't agree with, just ignore it or whatever. And if you don't come, that's fine too. We understand it, but this is who we are, and we're not gonna, we're not changing that for anybody. And so they ended up not coming. But she was really nice about it. By the time we got off the phone, she was kind of abrupt about it out the gate when I said we were Messianic, and she figured out what it was. But then she was kind of more appreciative of the conversation and whatever. But yeah, we've had quite a few non-believing Jewish people come through and come into the synagogue, and there's definitely some things that maybe are a little different. I mean, the fact that we have modern worship music and things like that is a little bit different, but for the most part, our experience is relatively the same as Bradam. People come and, hey, I really appreciate the service. This is one of the most Jewish services I've been to, authentically. And one of the comments that I've gotten pretty regularly, I know you guys have gotten it too, is that there was and it goes back to what we talked about in a previous episode, the idea of those from the nations driving the Jew to jealousy for God being a light to the Jewish people. As they go, there's something to the beauty of there being Gentiles participating in the Jewish tradition and custom reverently, respectively, and participating authentically in that, not making themselves Jewish or pretending like they are, but authentically participating. There's something to the beauty of that, and I know, like, Rabbi Eric's had people from the conservative synagogue say something to the effect of, maybe this is the right way because the Messiah is supposed to bring Jew and Gentile together, and this is where it's actually happening. And so we get kind of similar comments from time to time.
Yeah. If we can go back to some more colorful stories, I did remember an event. It wasn't here at Bradam, though. What?
And it didn't involve me. No.
There's some thunder. Got some storm. Actually, it did involve you to a degree.
Well, now I want to know.
Yeah. I was. Y'all had invited me to guest speak at CMC. This was when I was still very, very new.
Was this after my surgery?
Yes.
Yeah.
You were. Which also is a funny story in and of itself because
I was still slightly high.
Well, no, not that you were high. This was the time after that. Y'all were back in the building because your building had
the time after you were slightly high.
Yeah. But
you were more high this time.
No. But you did crack me up after that whole experience because you had these two massive surgeries and you were like, hey, just so I'm not having to do everything, but you were still rolling around on your little scooter doing everything. I was like, man, like this. I felt like Tim Hawkins' skit where he talks about, he's like, man, husbands, like, what are we doing? Like, if she ever leaves me, I'm going with her. I always felt like, why am I here? Like, he's perfectly fine. But anyway, you had me come guest speak, which was great for me because I was still, getting the experience, and it was wonderful to have the opportunity. So thank you for those times, getting to have those experiences to speak. But you had these, and I don't think they ever came back. They just came that one time. Two African-American gentlemen had come and were visiting. So I gave the message or whatever, and I had something critical to say about Levi and Simeon. We were in the story of the rape of Dinah. And I had, because, Jacob actually criticizes them and gets part of his blessing.
Because they got so violent.
Because they got so violent. That's right. All they wanted to do the entire rest of the time was talk to me about how, well, according to Jasher and Jubilees, like, it wasn't all that bad, and that they were clearly Hebrew Israelites. Like, it became very.
I remember exactly.
It became very apparent after a while, and so the whole time I was just trying to downplay, like, it's whatever, man. I'm not engaging, I talked with them, but I wasn't going to let them run the conversation along with Jasher and Jubilees. And
they were really intriguing. Like, I mean, really, they were nice.
They were very cordial.
Participated. But I thought it was interesting because in my past experience with that scenario, it's very abrupt. It's very, it's a lot of KJV stuff and whatever. But they came in with a complete Jewish Bible in their hands.
Yeah.
And they were very JPS Tanakh.
It was probably the only pleasant experience I've had with Hebrew Israelites ever. But it was still very funny because I remember like seeing them up from the bima and being like, oh man, I bet you. And then as soon as I finished, I was like wrapping my tallit up in its bag, and everyone was going out to Oneg, and they made a beeline straight to the front for me. I said, "Boy, here it comes!" I was like, I knew it's going.
The only other thing I could think of that's as potentially uncomfortable as that was we had a few years back we had a same-sex couple visit the synagogue. And I mean, really nice, really respectful. Everybody was kind to them, what have you. But they happened to come on a week in Leviticus where the parsha was dealing with sexuality, and the whole time I'm like, "Oh, this is not going to go well. This is not going to go." They were really nice and enjoyed the service, but unfortunately, we never saw them again. So
we have one of our county tax collector, that attends our synagogue. Great guy, wonderful guy. He's one of our elders at the congregation. Just love him. His wife was reading from the Brit Chadashah, and the portion she read is the one that says, sinners like publicans and tax collectors. and we could not have picked that moment better at all, because as she said, because I guess she didn't prepare, pre-read or whatever, but she just, and she said, and tax collectors, and as the words registered, she looked up toward her husband, and at that moment, everybody in the congregation was in one mind and one accord as they just died laughing with her. Anyhow, we've had amazing, funny experiences as part of a community.
Hear that, sweetie?
As part of a community and a family and those things. One of the things about Judaism and one of the things about Jewishness is that humor is part of what we do. And God in His Word instilled humor. Paul says, standing on Mars Hill, you guys might be a little too superstitious.
Elijah says, maybe your God's in the bathroom.
Right, or the whole, hemorrhoids with so there's humor in what goes on, and we thought it'd be fun just to share some of these experiences with you this week on our podcast. We may do another episode later on where we share more of these things.
I think a lot more.
I also think it might be fun to share some meaningful experiences that weren't necessarily humorous, but just memorable that go on. So anyhow, we're glad you guys tuned in. I hope that you enjoyed this, and make comments. Let us know. Contact us through social media so that we know where that you're out there, where you're from, and if you have a funny experience that you've had, share it with us.
Thank you for listening to the Messianics podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. And be sure to follow and interact with us on social media at Messianics Podcast.